Hush had something about it, right from the off. I felt, I'm not sure about the others, but I think we all felt that there was something a bit special about it. There was a version out by Joe South, there was a version out by a guy called Chris Ife. And we'd only heard it like in backgrounds, like you're in a disco or you're in a nightclub and you hear this thing and you think, that's a good tune, that's a good one. And a friend of mine who was working, a guy called Roddy Freeman, who was a singer with the Ronnie Smith band, which also had Ashley Holt in its membership and Rick Wakeman. They did it on stage and I happened to mention it to Rod Freeman and he said, I could come round and teach you the song. And he actually came round with his guitar and he wrote the lyrics out and he said, this is how it goes. And we actually learnt the song off Rod Freeman without ever really hearing the record, which I think made it a little bit different. I mean, we didn't know in the American market that someone could have a hit and someone would do the same song maybe 6 months, a year later and have a hit all over again, because that didn't tend to happen in England, but it happened in America big time for us. So we were quite pleased about it. I was quite pleased with the way the bass line turned out and the vocals a little bit shaky. Me and Rod and John doing our best. But it had that little bit of magic that's very hard to define. She broke my heart, but I love just seemed now hush, hush. Lord, I heard her calling my name now hush, hush. I need her loving and I'm not to blame now. Oh, every morning, I need him. Oh, I need him.
I started a long while ago in the R&B 60s in England, and that's where I sort of learnt my chops and everything, and a lot of those things that I learnt have all been useful along the way, but I've really felt in Purple it was either totally one thing, which is soloing like a mad mother, or being a rhythm guitarist with keyboard shaped. And that was fine for Purple. It was a big part of the sound.
And of course, when Hush came out in this country, nobody bothered. Nobody promoted us. I did hear that people were told not to work on that one because the Beatles had got a new single coming out, so give everything to the new Beatles single. People were going in the shops trying to buy Deep Purple, they couldn't buy us. We were kind of desperately looking for another hit record, and I think that's where we went wrong, because there was always pressure. You've got to have this hit record. I don't think we needed a hit record. You know, things were changing. You know, Led Zeppelin had started. They'd come over to America. They were touring the same venues we were. Vanilla Fudge didn't have hit records any longer, but these guys, they had the acts that were selling out. There was no reason why we couldn't do the same. We just needed time and to get rid of that pressure. And also being constantly told that you're in debt. It's not much fun when you've shifted millions and millions of records around the world. And we were still on basic wages. And it came to a head one day when I said to John Collette, I said, look, John, I said, you know, I keep reading that we're one of the biggest acts in the world. You know, we're selling out here, there and everywhere. We've sold all these records. I said, surely we can reap some of the benefits of this now. He said, well, what do you want? I said, well, I'd like to buy a new car. So I've been buying the same, I've been driving the same old Jaguar for 5 years. He said, what would you like? I said, I want a new Jaguar. Order one up, he said, you can have it. I said, I'd also like to pay off the mortgage on my parents' house. He said, phone them up, tell them it's done. I did all that. I had egg on my face because shortly after that, other plans were made for my future and I was moved sideways out of the band.
well, Nicky wasn't constructive. He didn't have any ideas, and he was an average bass player, so he had to go. Rod just wanted to go to America and live in America, and he's doing very well. He always does very well. Rod's a very nice guy. Well, so Nicky was, but he got very bitter.
We were due to record a song called Hallelujah, and amongst other titles. And Rod Evans was still in America arranging his marriage, and they're telling me that we're going in the studio. And I said, well, how can we go in the studio, you know, if we haven't got Rod with us? And John said, well, we know the keys and everything, so we can put backtracks down, and then Rod will come over and put his vocal on. So I swallowed that. I was told that we couldn't have the studio in the afternoon, we could only have it morning and evening. The plan was to bring Ian Gillan in the afternoon to learn the vocal and possibly put it on. And then when I turned up in the evening, I was going to be told what was going down, that we were getting a new singer in. Now, this may be true or not, but that's what I was told by the road crew, who overheard everything going down. And apparently when the roadie went round to pick up Ian Gillan, Roger Glover happened to be there, so he came along for the ride.
Roger, we found him in a gutter. No, Roger, poor old Roger. He turned up to the session to do one number we did. He was their bass player. We weren't originally going to take him until Pacey said, he's a good bass player, let's keep him. So I said, okay.
I was actually going out of the door that evening to get in the car to go to the studio when the phone rang, and I went back to answer it, and it was John Lord. And he said, bad news. I said, what's that? He said, the session is off tonight. I said, off? Why is that then? He said, they got problems with the 4-track machine, it's playing up. I said, anything we can do with the 2-track machine? Oh, he said, that's playing up as well. I can remember his exact words, even though it was a long time ago. And he said, so you got a night off? So I said, oh good, I'll take my girlfriend to the pictures, fine, you know, do the night off. So, of course, I never smelt a rat, I never suspected a thing. And the word crept out, and it got to a stage where everybody knew that Rod Evans and myself were out of Deep Purple. The only ones that didn't know were me and Rod Evans. I mean, can you believe that? So I called up Tetragrammaton in America. Of course, they were pretty shocked to have me on the line. And I said, I thought I'll play it cool. I said, what's going on with this? What's the plans for this single we're doing, Hallelujah? And they said, yeah, we got a copy of Hallelujah, but you're not on it. You imagine how I felt. We went off to play somewhere in Wales. And I thought, if I tell Rod Evans before the gig, he's probably just going to hit someone with an axe or something. He'll just go nuts. And I kept really cool. I thought, you know, I mean, really, I wanted to just get hold of somebody and lay them out. But I thought, no, keep it cool, protect your own interests, because they can't just do this and get away with it. You know, there's money at stake here. But it ended up so it was just Rod and I going back from Wales in the car. We dropped the others off at various places. And I told him, and he went absolutely nuts. You know, he said, I knew something was going on. He said, I'm going to kill those guys. He said, we'll dump this car in the canal. And I said, don't be silly, it's our car. We can't dump the car in the canal. He was just so mad, you know, to get kind of revenge. So he said, right, let's go and see John Coletta. So we drove down to Brighton to John Coletta's house. And I can imagine John Coletta wasn't too thrilled to see us on the doorstep. You know, his jaw just sort of sagged. And he said, I said, the game's up, John. I said, we know. And he just said, well, you better come in. So I phoned up John Lord, and no, he phoned up John Lord, that's right, and he said, they know. He said, Nick and Rod are here, he said, and they know. And he said, I'll put you on to him, you know. And I just said, what's it all about, John? What's the story? Oh, I can't tell you now, he said. It's a little bit me, and it's a little bit Richie, and it's a little bit Ian. He said, you must come round to dinner and I'll explain everything. And I never heard from him again.
Over the world, scratching on the ground, looking for the peace that nobody has found. I am the spokesman.
Your image comes first. You don't realise you've got an image until you read what somebody's written about you in the paper, and then subconsciously or subliminally that becomes your image, and you try and live up to it or down to it or whatever you've done.
Right.
And so what the hell anyway? You're not a real person. You're no longer a real person. And your off-stage person becomes a whole farce. And eventually, it's a complete turnaround, because the only time you're really being yourself is when you're on stage.
Something that I got fed up with playing with classical orchestras, and I thought, well, this is my turn. I'm the rock kind of thing, you know. So John was into more classical. I said, well, you've done that, I'll do the rock. Whatever turns out the best, we'll carry on with. And I said, if this fails, this record, then I'll play with orchestras the rest of my life.
You don't think it failed? You don't think it failed? In rock?
Well, hardly.
No, obviously.
To the east and west, hard-headed woman and a soft-hearted man. Caught the trouble since it all began. Took a little rice, took a little beans, rock and roll down to New Orleans. I'm a speed king, you gotta hear me sing. 'Cause I'm a speed king. See me fly.
Yeah, it was a good LP. It was very, very, everything was about 20, everything was about 1,000 miles an hour. It was good LP, that. Objectively speaking, I think so. Everything on there was good. I think there was one track I really hated.
There was no composition on the Purple things. There were basic ideas when you went into the studio. Maybe the magic with Purple in the old days was it was so spontaneous, because when we got it on tape, it was the first time we ever played it. So maybe that was the magic then. But by the same token, we often came across things which we enjoyed playing, but if you took it out of context of an album, you'd say it was dull. You see, you wouldn't listen to it. In the context of a 35, 40-minute album, it was right.
To get it onto tape, pain in the fucking arse. That's why I don't like recording too much.
You don't?
No. It's too clinical, again. A lot of people love it because they can edit their music, put it together and make it nice, but when they get on stage, they're lost. Well, my type of way of thinking is the opposite. I love to have that freedom, just going on stage and playing whatever I want to play at the time. I mean, I'll play the numbers which I'm supposed to play, but the in-between parts, if I'm feeling good, I'll be away and play something completely off the wall I've never ever played in my life.
working with people who are going to push me, because I get a lot of energy. For example, off of Richie. I mean, Richie, when he's playing on stage, tries to blast everyone off the stage. Right. I mean, it's a kind of competition. One of the things Richie said to me when I joined Deep Purple, he said, "You've got to bear this in mind." He said, "I don't mean it badly, he said, but I'm going to try and blow you off stage every night." I said, "All right, great." I said, "Well, in that case, I'm going to try and do the same to you." He said, "Yeah, great." He said, "In that way, we'll have a good band."
Purple could play 6, 7, 8, 10-minute piece of music. And the fact that it was played with a certain amount of skill and talent and a lot of bollocks, you know, made it happen.
On stage you have a lot of intense excitement. It's like adrenaline, kind of nervous presence. Right. People either love it or they get scared of it. You know? It's a bit too, you know. Right. That's why we have a lot of people that maybe hate us, because we're so demanding. If you don't like the music, you've got to turn it off. What we put down, you just can't talk over our music. Right. And we don't want anybody talking over it, so they either say nothing or they leave. And that's why we get, for instance, no radio play in England, because the housewives can't do their dusting when we're playing on the radio. It probably interferes with the Hoover or something. Smoke was one of my favourite tracks. Mary Long was one of my favourite tracks. Machine Head's good. What else? Speaking was... Into the Fire was very good, I thought. Child in Time was good. Purely from the vocal point of view, it was very, very different. In rock was good, but it was a good period, but we were coming up, you know what I mean?
This is the border of Devon and Cornwall, about 6 hours' drive from London. It's the middle of winter, so there's not a tourist to be seen, and the beaches and hills look deserted. But for the last fortnight, these hills have been shaken by the sound of one of England's top groups, Deep Purple.
I always had big sort of debates with Richie and John and Liam and Roger about my favourite Purple album. I'll tell you the reason why in a second. My favourite Purple album was Fireball.
Really hate the running, really hate the game. Looking at them all, I wanna be humble again.
And the reason I like that so much was because I felt it was, from a writing point of view, it was really the beginning of tremendous possibilities of expression. And I just went out and bought it yesterday again in New York and been playing it to Bruce. And some of the tracks on that album I think are really, really inventive. And in those days, before it was really being called heavy rock, it was still being called what? Right. Progressive or something like that, which was the tag that was being put onto it, the kind of music. And I really thought that some of the tracks on there were very progressive rock numbers, very progressive. And I've just been playing it again now. I listened to it in rock as well, which I was, knocked out with. But I thought that it was a shame that we didn't sort of continue with that sort of expression in our writing, which, as opposed to the sort of slightly formulated approach to our later albums.
The only ones I haven't liked have been Fireball. It's the only one I thought was like, no way. Yeah, I know a lot of people don't like that LP for some reason.
I think it's a really good LP.
Didn't see it, you know. There's just nothing on it. You know. Fireball, that was a bit of a disaster because it was like thrown together in a studio. We had no time, managerial pressure. You've got to play here, there, and you've got to make an LP. And then you're back to Australia, you're back to here. I got kind of bitter about that. I thought, you know, if you want an LP, you've got to give us time.
Right.
And they wouldn't. So I got a little bit bitter there, and I just threw ideas to the rest of the group that I thought up on the spur of the moment. I had nothing in my head. They gave us, because of the Fireball result, they said, all right, we'll give you 2 months off. Consequently, it was a great LP, I thought. And we had ideas, Ian Gillan, myself and Roger. It began to become a trio writing then.
Right.
John started stepping back, and Ian just gives percussive ideas.
Right.
So it was a trio by Machine Head. Who Do We Think We Are was really weird because I never spoke to Ian Gillan all that time we made the LP. I never spoke to him once. Old ladies started coming into it and all these personal problems, you know. Everybody refused to write with everybody else. You know, I was even holding back ideas. I was saying, I'm not going to give you Purple this idea because this is going to another thing, you know. So I was turning out shit, so was everybody else, you know. Just rubbish. Who Do We Think We Are was bad. Waste of time.
You know, every album started with the same tempo number and the expression. You know, I mean, it was just it. That's the way it was. That's one of the reasons I left. Because I was becoming stagnant. You know, we became so entrenched in these parallel lines beyond which we dare not pass, because that was the Purple identity and the Purple image.
Right.
That we were really restricting our means of expression.
I don't just play what I want to play. I play, well, people want to hear this, you know, which is what it's about. I don't like to play for myself. I've done that for too many years. Now it's a case of what's going to be good for people that are listening, you know.
Right.
It's only fair. If you want people to buy your records, then you should play to them. You shouldn't like play to yourself. That's what it's about. Success is playing to the people, not playing to yourself.
listen to the land. People are saying the woman is damned. They shall burn with the wave of the hand. Cities ablaze, the stars on fire. Woman's flames are reaching higher. We were fools, we called a liar. He is burned.
I was asked to join in maybe April or May, and officially in the papers in June. Of course, by June, when I was announced, we were actually kind of looking for a singer. I'd moved in with Ian Pace. I'd become very friendly with Richie. We'd gone to the inaugural Hamburg incident where Richie likes to take new guys. Spent a weekend with Richie, and of course, John Law's a fabulous fella. And felt very much part of the organization. And, you know, auditioning a singer was not really difficult because there was only one guy we ever auditioned. It was David Coverdale.
I asked him to type in a photograph down and asked him if I could have the job. Basically, it was, I was working in a shop, and I didn't expect to get the job with Purple. If I'd gotten an audition, I was hoping, I knew they had their own record label, I was hoping that they could offer me something on my own, or say, well look, I'm afraid your voice isn't the sort of voice we're looking for, but we know somebody who is, you know. But after blowing with the band, I couldn't believe it, you know. I went apeshit, really. I couldn't sleep and also all this bit. I'd always worked with good musicians, Steve, don't get me wrong, but this was like another level. It was so in tune with what I wanted, you know, and fortunately I was with what they wanted, you know. So it's worked out really very well. But it was the first time I'd gotten off my arse to do something, you know, and played up.
Morning came, no one came. On the same game was stood and stared. When it came, no one was spared. Still
Being a new guy in any band is always kind of interesting. David and I were 4, 5, 6, 7 years younger than the rest of the chaps. And I was coming off a career in trapeze, which we were knocking on the door very big in America. We'd already been selling 5,000, 10,000 seats a night, already had a top 60 record in America with trapeze, so I felt real strong. And it was a time for me where I was becoming a songwriter as well.
Great reputation, which, you know, basically the new band had to live up to and go past if possible, you know. But like the moment I joined the band, it was never, you know, never mentioned by any member of the band that I was a replacement or Glenn was a replacement. As far as we were concerned, it was a new band, you know. The fact that it's called Deep Purple is because when you get the three musicians, John, Richie and Ian together, that is the nucleus and that is the sound of Purple. All I can do is write and put my voice on, you know, the things there, but there's no way I can change the sound, you know, because Blackmore, John and Ian together have their own sound.
Than now. I mean, they've been living in this fantasy world
so many years.
presumably the contrast between...
I've always had the fantasy there, you know.
Sorry?
I've always wanted, I've known what it was about, you know. I just wanted to, instead of standing outside the door, I wanted to get in. You know?
And you're happy now you're there?
I'm very happy, yeah, right.
People can now say to me, what's it like to be a superstar? And I say, pardon? Because I'm still playing the same as I did before, but it's like changing a job. It's like anyone changing a job. I'm playing with better people. The money side is there. I mean, financially it's fine, but it's a change of job. And to be called a superstar just because you've changed your job or firm as input is just stupid to me.
I bought a foundation of groove. I bought more melody, as probably in the vocal department. I bought harmonic textures in the harmonies, and I added a little swagger for sure on the low end. With me, it's the notes I didn't play in Deep Purple that were more apparent than the notes that Roger played. It would have been silly to have a bass player come in and be a Roger Glover. And people have called me the funky influence in Deep Purple. They knew that going into it. That's my background. I am that kind of bass player. I'm a soul singer in a rock band. And I think the difference and the beauty of Gillan and Glover from Who Do You Think We Are to Burn stands up amazingly.
Well, it's a new direction altogether. And I think that they've got to forget the past and really do what they're going to do. I would like to see more strength of personality coming through. Mm-hmm. And I would like to see a little more naivety, a little less know-how.
Right.
But I still think the band's great. You know, if you want... You know, I'm really only picking out... I mean, it would be so easy to say, yeah, they're great, fantastic, and everything like that, which of course they are. But, I mean, trying to be constructive, I would like to see a fresher, slightly more carefree approach, instead of the cold, calculated approach, which I get the feeling is when I listen to music.
David Coverdale brought a very bluesy approach, which Ian Gillan doesn't have. A throatier, darker, deeper, soulful voice. And I don't use those words, I mean, I'm using the words soul and funky in a way I feel comfortable with. Let's use those words properly. Deep Purple were known as a hard rock band. #1 rock band in the world, if you will, at the time with Led Zeppelin and Yes. But like I said earlier in the interview, what's the point of having two clones of Gillan and Glover coming in and recreating Machine Head? A very bold move by the rest of the band to bring two guys in who are going to change the scope of rock again, and the Burn album stands up in the history and annals of rock history. You know, as far as Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, I think Burn stands up with a classic album like Machine Head simply because it is a bold step forward. It is two new guys coming in with three very accomplished musicians who have stamped their authority on a record immediately. It was a very confident rehearsal period, a very confident pre-production. And I wasn't thinking about finances or touring. All I was concerned about was making my mark in a supergroup as a bass player and second lead singer.
You know we had no time. We could not even try. You know we had no
Unfortunately, the rehearsals, we were booked in for a month at this castle in Wales where Bad Company and Joe Cocker rehearsed and a few others. We just played football and had seances all the time. You know, that's all we ever did. And nobody ever bloody did anything, you know. It's terrible. it's such a nice atmosphere, and it was like everybody was so lazy. Like John, he never used to get up till 6 at night, come straight down for a meal, stay there eating till about 10 o'clock at night. He'd go down to the studio and play, and by 10 o'clock at night I got pissed off anyway, and I did go to bed. And so we hardly saw each other, you know. And then we suddenly realised we had about 4 days to left before we went to the studios, so we all went, oh, what are we going to play, what are we going to play?
We've never been great lyricists, and we don't write sort of fantastic melodies and tunes, you know, except for Child in Time, which is quite a pretty tune. I mean, there's not that many pretty tunes,
Is that something you regret?
No, not particularly. I regret it to the extent that if we could find a really great melody that would fit in with the way we play and the way we want to play, then fair enough. You'd use it, you know, like a shot. But we're more of a... we don't construct our songs like, say, Rodgers and Hart used to, you know, or Lennon and McCartney, even. They're sort of amalgams of what everyone is able to...
From a certain basic idea.
Ian might come up with a sort of a drum rhythm. Well, he came up with a drum pattern... You'd all know one, it's opening track on side 2 of Burn. Came purely and simply, initially, from a drum rhythm that Ian thought up.
Whereby Might Just Take Your Life came from an organ chord sequence that John had. So you start with the basic, simple little idea, then you get 5 minds saying, well, I think this would fit with that. That's what we do.
You know,
that's maybe why they're not too melodic, they're not too lyrical.
We're a rock band. I mean, I don't like the term hard rock. I don't like the term heavy metal. You know, I'd like to think of ourselves as a rock and roll band. Burn, Machine Head, In Rock seem to centre around a specific kind of theme. Not even a thing you can put into words. But they hang together. You know it's part of that album, and it feels part of that album. And you can play the album from A to Z without thinking, oh, that sticks out like a sore thumb.
We're not brilliant songwriters, you know. I write most of the stuff, but I think some of it stinks, you know. We only get away with it because we're so good musically, you know. In fact, I wish some people would come forward and write songs for us, because we need it.
To listen to the next album, you know, in a way, because I felt choked, because, you know, something I'd been a part of, and there was somebody else singing, you know, to start with. I didn't even want to listen to it. It was very personal, you know, the whole band was personal. We've been through a lot together, you know.
Right.
And the players, like, I'd never, you know, I'd never had such experiences on stage with such players. I've never been, for example, literally moved to tears, you know, when I first worked with Richie on stage. Unbelievable.
Dressing room because I like to tune up and I like my solitude before I go on stage. I tend not to get too involved in people because, to be quite honest, I find a lot of people are boring. I find myself boring most of the time. I don't like to be caught up. I always like to be the opposite. I always was at school. That's why I don't smoke. I used to find everybody at school smoking, you know. Oh, it's a big deal, man. Smoke, you know, rebellious image. Like, I thought, well, because of that, I won't smoke, and I never have, you know. Maybe if they hadn't smoked, I would have done, you know. Mind you, I was probably doing other things which were just as bad, if not worse, you know. I'm still very moody, shy, and very honest, which a lot of people can't take, you know. Honest? Yeah. And which is the hardest thing in this business is to is sincerity. Once you can fake that, you're laughing, you know.
When Richie's in a band, there's going to be tension and friction, and that's the way it's going to be. And as soon as comfortable things set in, people would move and the tension would shift and people would have to leave or be fired, you know. And Burn was the typical example of 5 guys living together, enjoying the parody of playing these great songs live, at least for 6 months, you know, while it was new.
Up to the first show, I was really worried. But hearing the crowd reaction was unbelievable. It was like a dream. It was magical. I was in Copenhagen, which was one of my favorite cities in the world, and the reaction was amazing. Oh, I'd only seen things like that and read about them. You know what I mean, on TV or something. But like we were dragged off the stage and all this, and I was a buzz. You know what I mean? It was just like feeling. You just felt fucking great. You felt good. You know, it was a feeling that had you bubbling inside. It was really very nice. And I thought, oh, I'm going to like this. Audience reaction is the best dope in the world. You know, a good audience reaction. I can come off feeling fucking 2 feet taller. It's a great experience.
There's one engineer and a couple of T-boys around, and it doesn't really inspire you to turn out your best. Whereas when you're on stage, you're playing to the people and they inspire you, obviously, you know. I suppose it's an ego thing, really. You like to kind of basically show them what you know, and you get really inspired. You get a real exciting thing going with the crowd because they just turn you on.
We don't have many bad nights. In fact, since we've started, we've got on 3 fingers we've had maybe 3 bad nights. I mean, we do have a bad night. We don't fight. We just walk off, and we don't speak to each other. And the next day we go on stage, and it's like that. We don't ever argue intensely. When we criticise each other, it's always polite criticism.
Yeah, you're shit, man.
Is one of the best, you know, like he's as far as I'm concerned, he's a total electric musician. Him and Beck are on the same level as far as I'm concerned. Well, I think Richie's higher because he's more consistent, you know, as much as I love Beck. But I've heard Richie play some of the finest blues, you know, that's made the hairs under my neck stand up. I agree. And he can also go to the extreme.
We got Blackmore at tail end of, you know, Machine Head era into the Burn where he could make me cry. Nobody makes me cry really, no guitar players, you know, only other singers, but there are good singers. Because some nights Richie Blackmore was so incredibly brilliant, and then some nights he would be incredibly crap, as he knows, for some strange reason of his own doing. But one thing Blackmore is we don't have characters like Blackmore anymore. We have people that like to think they can be. Blackmore is a mystique. Blackmore could still come back and rock again if he wanted to. And he might. Blackmore, to me, was a great leader of a band, although some things were the behavioral department and all of us were stupid. But he ran that band pretty much the way he wanted to run it, whether it was immature or not.
Stormbringer, we wrote basically in the studio because we've been working so hard proving the worth of the new band this year. Someone turned around and said, "Oh, it's time to go in the studio." I'm like, "Oh, fuck," you know. So it was like panic stations. And we got in and then it worked again, fortunately. But it must be obvious to anybody with an ear who has listened to Burn and Stormbringer that it's a mature, logical progression.
Coming out of nowhere, dropping like rain. Stormbringer dance on the thunder again. Dark cloud gathering, breaking the day. No point running 'cause it's coming your way.
It'd be silly if we started suddenly writing like the Eagles, because they do it better. But we do Deep Purple better than the Eagles.
Well, David singing like Joni Mitchell is silly. You do what you're good at.
Yeah, and which you accept.
What comes out is a conglomeration of 5 people's ideas and the way they play. You are what the audience make you. It's no good saying you're a serious musician and everybody starts laughing at you. You know.
Right.
You know, if you do what you do to the best of your ability, then the audience puts you into a category. You don't. They make you. They say, "Well, these are now a heavy rock band. This is a nice folk band." You don't say that. You know, you're too inside it. You can't say anything.
It's a very American-orientated album. I didn't realise that at the time of recording or whatever. It was on listening. I thought it sounds like an American album. You know what I mean?
I think, was Burn mixed in the States? Definitely not, because Burn is definitely an English-sounding album.
Exactly. This is something I get from when I listen to Machine Head or something. They sound clinical, you know, like a bit dry. And I didn't want that with Burn. We got away with it. It is a different sounding album from the other Purple things, but when I heard the mixed version of the new album, fuck, you know, whether that was the record plant or what, you know, but it had the sound that I wanted, you know, a very meager sound, you know, that electric intensive sound, you know, very clean, crisp, you know, rather than dry sound, clinical feel, and I thought, shit, this is, you know, I really sounds like an American album.
I like black people that can sing rock and roll, but I don't like black music, funk, you know. It bores me to tears.
So you definitely don't want to sit down and go that way?
Oh, no. This is as far as it goes now. It's the end of that. Back to rock and roll, next LP.
Isn't that hard because Glenn and David are so much into black music?
No, only Glenn's into black music.
He's a guy that used the words Glenn Hughes in his shoeshine music and funky, but if you people listen to Stormbringer, please listen. Richie Blackmore is damn funky, whether he likes it or not. He played wonderfully on the album. I think at this point he'd had enough of playing. He'd lost his foothold, I think, as far as we were going in a more band direction, as far as Coverdale, Lord Pace and Hughes were. We were going in a new direction, you know, we were growing.
I wasn't, in a way, I was going through, not a personal problem, but there was like, I was thinking of other things and I should have been thinking of music, but I wasn't thinking really much on music at the time. Because I didn't have the people there that I wanted to have there, you know.
He misunderstands, I think he misunderstands when we talk about funky and things, because he's such a funky player, you know. Like his licks came up for the that song "You Can't Do It Right with the One You Love." What's that if it isn't funk, you know? But he thinks funk is the I think his idea is like cool, don't dig-a-dig-a-ding.
James Brown.
But then again, he's thinking of it in the extreme sense. I'm thinking of it in the subtle sense, Like one of the funkiest bands I've ever heard is Free, and that's one of Richie's favourite bands.
Right.
But he doesn't regard it as funky. He calls that heavy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to me, it's funky as well as heavy, I think there's no way that I can get away from soul, because that's how I feel it. Whether it's rock and roll or what. Lady Double Dealer, as far as I'm concerned, is a soul song. That was written from an experience. That was, and I'm relating to it when I sing it on stage. The only way I can get into the idea of singing it is to remember the time I came home and found my flat ripped to pieces, by a lady. But that, I think, that's the extreme. We're certainly never going to be a Coolin again. So, I like Cool, don't get me wrong, but there's no way we could be.
There are times when I feel like just saying, oh, let's forget it, let's all go home, and we've all got enough money to just say, well, I'll do another LP when I feel like doing it. Because really, that's what every group should do. But every group is pressured by the record company. It's only guarding their own interests. A group only lasts a certain length of time, so they get the most out of them. It doesn't matter whether they fold up in 5 years, as long as they've made about 10 LPs in the meantime. Whereas in actual fact, to get the best out of a group, you've got to give them a year for each LP, I would think, for an actual progression without forcing it. And that really bugs me, actually, going to the studio. Right, we're going to turn out an LP, boys. Here we go, blah, blah, blah. I've got to write a song today, It's just ridiculous,
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've got the guts to do it, but I've often thought, that's it. I'd like to leave, not the band, I just want to get out of the business, play when I feel like playing, and do a record when I feel like recording. It would be fantastic, but you can't have it all your own way,
The reason Richie left Deep Purple was, and I can't quote his exact words, but I can quote the sort of basic statement was, I want to do something different.
Right.
That's what he said.
Right.
Now what happened is he left us and he did exactly the same.
Yeah.
And when he left, we did something different. We changed. I mean, say, if anything, Richie was the person which was holding it in one place.
Yeah, but...
And he took it away, and he took that same thing with him.
Can I just enhance what Ian said?
You can do what you like.
No, also, a very, very major part of that was the fact that Blackmore wanted people to do things how he imagined. Instead of when you present a song to a group, it's a group song. Everybody puts their identity on it for a group sound and a group feeling, right? Blackmore wanted puppets. That he could manipulate into doing exactly what the fuck he wanted. And with that, it's too restricting for a free-thinking musician, or a self-expressive musician, to cope with that kind of situation.
Starting with Black Sheep of the Family, the song, I put it to the Purple, let's do the song. They went, no, why should we? I'm like, but it's such a great song. And they went, no, we didn't write it. I'm like, what's that got to do with that? And I'm like, because you won't get any writing credits, you don't do this song? Yep. That was basically the bottom line. So I said, well, I'm going to do it with somebody else. And Ronnie was just around at the time. That threw me too. If someone comes along that has a good song, you go, let's do that song. You don't go, well, it's not one of our songs. A lot of that went down with Purple. I can never understand that. It was Patey and John that were adamant about not doing anybody else's songs.
There was never any great love lost between me and Richie. And I didn't dislike him and he didn't dislike me. We just didn't, apart from the first 2 or 3 years, or first 2 years, there was no common ground, really. Apart from a meeting point in the middle on certain musicals.
You obviously worked well together. What sounded like
we worked extremely well. I mean, some of those guitar organ duels that we used to do, I still think are among the best things I've ever played. But there was nothing to do with friendship necessarily. It was to do with a common response to each other's talent, whatever.
Like Glenn and I could, with the kind of voices that we had and the unusual blend, it could have been a sensational fucking opposite to John and Richie and Glenn and I. But the ego took over. I didn't have that much of an ego in those days. Now I'm fucking totally conceited. But like I couldn't handle his, upfront attitude. You know what I mean?
I don't have much patience for people, and I'm a very moody person. And it's like, misunderstood? No, not really, because I want them to understand that I'm a moody person and that life is not a bowl of cherries. Music is, you're always fighting music to get to the bottom of something. You can't, go through life shaking people's hands and saying, everything's wonderful. If you're a newborn Christian, maybe. I just, for me, life is a struggle. There's icebergs everywhere. You've got to dodge them.
You couldn't get close to Richie. I think anybody can. As soon as you get close to Blackmore, you're gone. I'm as far as, gone, either fired or you're gone spiritually. Because, he doesn't want comfort. He wants tension. I like that. I want to thank him for pushing me and actually robbing me to make me a better singer, bass player. The old drama of don't come across my side of the stage because I'll hit you with my guitar. I want to thank him for that because it showed truth, arrogance, and somewhat of a genius to do that.
David, heard me on Cobham albums and stuff, and James Gang albums. And they were looking all over the East Coast, New York and Boston and yada yada, I guess. And I lived 2 minutes from him in Malibu, in California. It was ridiculous. So.
And how did he actually approach you?
He just called up and they just said, "You wanna, jam a bit?" And I said, "Yeah." I wasn't that enthused about being in an English band.
Why?
Because English bands tend to be a bit sterile a lot. Everything is exact. Every time they play, it's the same jokes, the same, it really is. It gets to a point of being really bland. And I just didn't want to, the way I play, I didn't want to be a part of that. So, when I did go down, it was within the first, tune, I knew that it was, they're a very Americanized English band. They grew up with the same roots as I grew up with, which really amazed me.
Simple things.
They were kind of in a slump because I think of the situation with Richie being, from what I gather, like, don't even come on my side of the stage routine, you know, which is really a lot of...
And you're the opposite, you run from one side to the other.
Well, I always have, even, you know, I mean, a band is a band, you know, I mean, if you're going to go out solo, you go out solo, but if you're in a band, you're in a band.
Besides the music, Tommy, have you got any other outside interests? Hobbies?
Tennis. I play tennis. I just mainly just
music.
Music and drinking and burning and looting.
I'm not going to tell you that we had a great time, Tommy and I, cavorting around the globe, stoned, because it wasn't great. Drugs started to creep into Deep Purple for me mid-tour on the Cal Jam period, where I had not known I had a problem until a year later. You never do. What happened was, I think all of us in the band were dabbling in intoxication, whether it be drink or drugs. I'm not going to name names, it's not my style. But certain members were doing this and certain members were doing that. But when it came to the shove where people were going to sleep and I was basically still partying with the crew, didn't know I had a problem until Come Taste the Band. It affected my attitude for sure. I was very, I don't know, over the top in a lot of things. I was never mean to anybody, I just was probably mean to myself. In hindsight, I wish I could have got a grip of it, but years later I did, and I've become a better person because of that.
Come Taste the Band was a bloody great album. You know, it had some fabulous ideas on it and some great possibilities for direction changes, which wouldn't have been too right-angled. You know, they would have been reasonably part of the same direction that we'd been in. It's just that it was that the internal thing in the band didn't allow that, unfortunately, to be held together.
Mm-hmm. They recorded Coming Home without me, because I'd actually had a bit of a meltdown on the 18th floor of the Arabella Hotel, where I confronted a couple of my guys in the crew due to my intoxication behind cocaine. When I got a copy of Come Taste the Band, there was a song called The Dealer, which I'd sang called something else, where I got a copy of the master, and Dealer comes on, I'm starting to start, and here comes David's voice, singing a whole new lyric, which they'd taken my voice off, which blew me away, because my version was bitching. And, of course, coming home, when I heard the opening of the album, I'm going, wait a minute, I don't remember being on that song. But, like I say, there's no mistakes in God's world. You know, it happens to every band. A lot of people in their 20s died of drug abuse, like Tommy and my brother, Paul Kossoff, and other guys that, you know, died. I scraped myself off the gates of insanity a couple of times. But I'm proud of the work I did in Deep Purple.
I still believe that there was a time when Purple was arguably one of the best live performance rock and roll, hard rock bands in the world.
Absolutely. For a couple of years it was the best.
And Dave and Glenn's entrance into the band did nothing to stop that reputation. It was only after a while that something started to go wrong. You know, egos took over. money became so available. And
the band became dishonest to themselves as the musicians that they were, and it stopped being a group in the sense of a group. And if we'd done any more recording or continued, it would have been so diverse under the Deep Purple umbrella. It would have been totally insulting to anybody buying a Deep Purple album. I would think. And I think we did the right thing to knock it on the head.
One thing people should know about Deep Purple, there was a lot of deception, lies and betrayal going on behind the scenes with other things. There was a lot of splinters going on, a lot of people not telling the truth, a lot of people sick and tired of being sick and tired. We were all 5 different guys on 5 different missions. I was glad when it was over. I wanted to get away. I was tired. I didn't want to make another record of unfocused rock music. You know, 3 albums is enough. 3 albums and 2 live albums is enough.
We did a concert in Liverpool. We did a short English tour.
March the 28th, 1996.
We looked at each other and nobody actually said a word, but everybody knew what was in everybody's mind. And that was the end of it. And at the end of the tour, Tommy came home. You know, he came home here and he started doing his own thing because he had his second album out. And then 5-6 months later, you know, we heard the news.
Off the record.
When the fun stops, you might as well just stop everything, you know.
Sweet child in time, you'll see the line that's drawn between the good and the bad. See the blind man, yeah, he's shooting at the world, bullets flying, taking toll. If you feel bad, Lord, I bet you have.